Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly shocking historical account of deception, espionage, and covert operations that went down during the 1948 war. Our explainer today draws on some incredibly detailed historical articles from Al-Arsh News and Rahal. And honestly, this story is so cinematic it almost feels like it has to be fiction. But the sources map out a very real and incredibly meticulous intelligence operation. So we're going to piece together what is essentially a masterclass in infiltration. So, here's the central mystery we're unraveling today. How exactly does an Israeli spy manage to become a revered imam leading Muslims in prayer? Seriously, think about that. It defies logic. How does a covert operative not just sneak into a community, but actually rise to the absolute highest ranks of its spiritual leadership, getting people to trust him implicitly, day in and day out? Well, let's trace exactly how this impossible cover story was built, maintained, and then ultimately violently dismantled. All right, Section 1, the devoted imam in Khan Yunis. To really grasp the scale of this deception, we have to travel back to the late 1940s, right into the heart of the Gaza Strip. The scene is Khan Yunis, a bustling city on the edge of massive historical shifts. And right there, we find a man known as Sheikh Abdullah Fatal. Now, he wasn't just some casual guy in the community. According to the historical texts, he had memorized the entire Quran, along with all of its complex sciences and interpretations. He actually became the imam of the great mosque in Khan Yunis. Our sources note he had this breathtakingly beautiful recitation voice, a voice so renowned it even echoed through the sacred halls of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Because of all this, he wasn't just respected. This guy was deeply trusted and genuinely loved by the local Palestinian population. He was literally their spiritual anchor. And, what's absolutely crucial to understand about building a perfect cover is that you have to play the part publicly. You have to live it. The sheikh displayed this intense vocal hatred for the Israeli and British occupations. He was frequently chanting Allahu Akbar and openly praying for the victory of the Palestinian Mujahideen. He was essentially a master of psychological alignment. He told the people exactly what they needed to hear, promised them victory, and stood as this fiery, unwavering symbol of their resistance. Moving on to Section 2, befriending the Egyptian army. So by the time the geopolitical landscape really fractures into outright conflict, his reputation is rock solid. When the 1948 war officially kicks off and foreign forces mobilize into the region, the Egyptian army enters Khan Yunis. They're commanded by major historical figures like Ahmed Abdelaziz and his deputy Kamal al-Din Hussein. And what does our devoted imam do? He doesn't just sit on the sidelines. No way. In the following days, he actively visits the Egyptian military camps. He uses his massive status as a revered sheikh to boost the morale of the troops. As the weeks roll on, he basically becomes a fixture in the camp. He's leading the soldiers in prayer, using that famous voice to recite the Quran to them, echoing their battle chants. He had successfully and completely embedded himself right in the nerve center of the Allied military command. Which brings us to Section 3, surveillance and uncovering the hidden. But listen, no cover is totally flawless, right? Especially when you place yourself directly in the crosshairs of military intelligence. The Egyptian services were sharp, and they started noticing some weird anomalies. The operation unraveled step by step. First, officers noticed the sheikh was quietly disappearing from the camp for hours after midnight. Kind of strange. Next, they deployed advanced surveillance and uncovered something completely out of place. They found this strange, complex network of wires strung up all around his residence. This was early communication tech, which is totally incongruous with the life of a simple religious scholar. Finally, they took action. The Egyptians realized these wires were being used to communicate with Israeli forces. So, an Egyptian officer volunteers for a highly dangerous nighttime mission, tails the sheikh as he sneaks out toward the Israeli camps, and catches him dead to rights. Okay, Section 4, the spy's true identity and end. The arrest goes down. And in the interrogation room, the entire facade is just stripped away to reveal a truth that stunned literally everyone involved. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual contrast here. The man the community knew as Sheikh Abdullah Fadl, the revered Muslim imam who led their prayers, he was actually Yehuda Jacob Fadl. He wasn't a Muslim cleric at all. He was a Yemeni Jew who had immigrated to Palestine in the 1940s and had been operating as an elite spy for Israeli intelligence the entire time. let's dig into the why and how of this recruitment, because it's fascinating. Israeli intelligence specifically targeted him because of his background. Coming from Yemen, his Arabic was flawless, deeply authentic, and completely native. Combine that with his naturally beautiful voice, and he was the absolute perfect asset to plant into a religious setting. They didn't just teach him how to act, they leveraged his innate cultural and linguistic skills to forge an unbreakable persona. He was explicitly planted among the Muslim community to be a magnet for trust, drawing people in so he could extract high-level strategic information and quietly feed it back to his handlers. Now, in wartime, military justice is incredibly swift and pretty brutal. Once the confession and the evidence were secured, the Egyptian military court sentenced him to death by firing squad. There was no lengthy appeal process here. The sentence was executed immediately. And in a final chilling note of psychological warfare, the very officer who arrested him actually carried his body and dumped it near the walls of the Israeli military camp. It was a really grim end for a man who had served as one of Palestine's most famous Quran readers, only to be unmasked as a covert tool of infiltration. Finally, Section 5, questions about infiltrating the nation. So the historical narrative itself concludes right there, with a body at the camp walls. But the sources we are analyzing today use this event to pivot towards some pretty heavy modern-day warnings. The source raises a deeply provocative question based on this precedent. If an intelligence agency had the capability and the audacity to place a covert operative as an imam in the Al-Aqsa Mosque back in the 1940s, when technology was, primitive compared to today, what are the limits now? The authors impartially ask their readers to consider if similar assets could currently be acting as imams in holy sites like Mecca, or perhaps operating as influential preachers broadcasting on satellite TV to millions of people. And the authors push this line of questioning even further. They ask, have intelligence operatives moved beyond just religious pulpits and mass media? Have they systematically infiltrated the highest levels of government and the very centers of decision-making today? The articles really challenge the reader to look at the current political landscape and wonder, who is actually pulling the strings from behind the curtain, suggesting that the tools of infiltration have evolved way, way beyond a single man with a wire network in Gaza. And this brings us to the final overriding lesson that the sources really want to imprint on the reader. Do not look at people, no matter who they are, but at their actions. This explainer isn't just about a spy caught in 1948. The authors frame it as a timeless warning about the nature of trust and deception. They urge constant vigilance, reminding us that titles, charisma, and public piety can all be completely engineered. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. In our current era of deepfakes, advanced psychological operations, and incredibly complex geopolitics, how truly confident are we in the identities of those who claim to lead us?